This is Joshua Hart here for Seconds Out. Delighted today to be joined by S-Jam Boxing's very own Adam Morallee here over Zoom. Adam, appreciate your time as always. And how is everything, mate?
Yeah, all good, Josh. How are you?
I'm very, very good. A little bit tired. My throat seems to be a little bit sore, but on the whole, I'm very good. A very exciting time in boxing at the moment. We've seen some big news over the last few weeks, but we'll start off by just talking about a couple of your fighters we've seen out recently. We'll start off with, in a lot of people's opinion, the best prospect at Matchroom Boxing now, following a beautiful body shot knockout on the Catterall versus Prograis undercard. Junaid Boston, just talk to me about him and that performance in Manchester a couple of weeks back
It
now.
was Junaid has done what's been asked of him, right? He's faced high level opponents, um, higher than others have of his level. And then he had the Gordy Russ fight last December, which was a real breakthrough for Junaid. He really suffered in that fight and he came through the other side of it, made us change a few things. He then fought Jack Martin, had a terrific performance, and then kind of a few things kind of stuttered around the English title, Ishmael Davis, all that kind of stuff. We got it going again against this opponent at the end of October, and I thought he did the job. He did what he's supposed to do. Like, you've got to keep testing someone like Junaid and keep taking them up the levels, matchmaking them carefully. We matchmake Junaid carefully with Tom Dallas, with Grant Smith. We're really, really careful. But Junaid just wants to be let off the leash. He wants to be let off the leash. He wants to fight everyone. And I do think in the UK, we do build our prospects a little bit slower than in the States. But I do think we're very aligned with Matchroom now on how quickly we want to build. Matchroom, want big fights in 2025, like no easy fights or whatever for anyone in 2025. I think Junaid's going to have a very, very big 2025, ending with a British title shot at the end of it. British title win.
And just looking, obviously, we know that Junaid's mentioned having a bit of a frustrating year, only the two outings, which can be a bit frustrating as an up-and-coming prospect. But was that fight in October just about, listen, we can't let a 22-year-old prospect finish the year with only one fight, so you just had to try and find a date to get him on?
Yeah, he's supposed to be fighting for the English, and then all the stuff with Ish happened. He's got a lot of respect for Ish. All that stuff happened around that time, and that kind of delayed progress. And then match, he was going to appear on a matchroom show at the end of the year, so it was just a little slight delay. But we've spoken to, we've had really good chats with matchroom, and we've got a nice plan for next year.
Looking at that Ishmael Davis fight, when we first saw the news, obviously a long time back now, when he was going to be stepping in on 6 days' notice to take on Josh Kelly, one of the things that kept playing out in my mind was if Ishmael Davis is to put in a really good performance or even win the fight against Josh Kelly, where does that leave the Junaid Boston fight that we've been seeing ordered for a while? Apparently, it's agreed now, despite what we're hearing from the other side of the negotiations. From your side, it seems to be agreed. What was there any point where you were thinking maybe this Ishmael Davis fight might slip away from us?
Yeah, look, I think Junaid wants that fight. Let's just be clear. Junaid wants that fight. But I think both fighters are agreed that it's got to happen at the right time for the right money and for the right title. If it's ordered, Junaid won't back away from anything. So that's ordering something. But as promoters, as managers, I think it's incumbent on us to make sure when two people fight, they do it for the in the best place for the right titles for the most money. Um, I think you've got to be careful with that because that can sometimes lead to people delaying and delaying and delaying fights. But yeah, I did think that if Ish beat Josh Kelly and he was getting paid big six figures for that fight, is he going to come back down and fight Junaid for the English title? Probably not. I think Ish wants to go get the British title. He should go get the British title, and then him and Junaid should fight for the British title.
So what will be the plan next year for Junaid Boston? Will it be straight back into the 10 rounders now?
Straight back into the 10 rounders. Junaid should be getting the English title next year, defending the English title, and then winning the British, and then fighting Ish for the British title. That's what I'd like to see. He should fight Ish for the British title. I think it's a headliner up in Sheffield. It's a phenomenal fight. I think the winner goes on, moves up to world level.
And then just looking at another fighter, Tommy Fletcher was out a few weeks ago in his return fight since having his tonsils removed. While not the night for him, I spoke to Mark Tibbs last week and he said that there's been a good response from Tommy in the gym. I was just looking at the plan for 2025 for him. When can we see Tommy Fletcher back?
Look, I think it's when you suffer a loss like that, it's difficult. It's difficult for Tommy. Tommy had his tonsils out. He had a fantastic camp. A lot of people said to me afterwards, did he not have a great camp? No, he had a fantastic camp. I think on the night he didn't put in a good performance. And as management, as trainers, you look at that, you want to kind of understand it. We know how talented Tommy is. He's got the physical attributes, he's got the boxing skills, he's got the right mind for it. He just had a really bad day at the office. And some people will look at defeats like that and say, oh, that marks this person out as this level. But it's not the truth with Tommy. Tommy should be beating Volkov's. The greatest respect to Volkov's, Tommy should be beating Volkov's. He did not put in a good performance. We all know that. We're talking to Tommy about it, understanding what we need to change and making those improvements. And I think Tommy Fletcher next year, Tommy Fletcher this year, but Tommy Fletcher next year should be having a brilliant year. He should be moving up, should be getting Southern Area English titles. That's the level Tommy's at.
When after the fight, what was like the initial reaction in the dressing rooms? Obviously, because one thing I highlighted to Mark Tibbs was when we see a prospect at Tommy's level lose, you tend to see them, stay away from the social media for a few days, not really say too much. But within a couple hours, you already saw a clip on Queensberry's social media page of Tommy addressing it straight away and saying, "Listen, this is not the end of me."
Yeah, look, we were honest with Tommy in the changing room. Wasn't good enough. Wasn't a good enough performance. We know how good he is. It's one thing, people often talk about boxing and you find your level, right? You find your level pretty quick in boxing. And it was like this was not a case of Tommy finding his level and getting chinned by someone and him not being as good as we thought he was. This was a case of Tommy not performing. So we told Tommy that. I said it to Tommy. Mark said it to Tommy. Tommy's dad said it to Tommy. Took it really well, understood it, processed it, wanted to do interviews, wanted to talk about it afterwards. Like, listen, not happy. No one was happy. Tommy wasn't happy. No one was happy about that performance. But what do? You take it, you examine it, you understand, and you go again.
And then just looking at a fighter who has a lot more positive news and a huge fight coming up. After a few cancellations of fight dates for Johnny Fisher, it is finalised
Yeah.
December 21st, Usyk versus Fury 2 undercard. He'll share the ring with a man that he shared the ring with many, many years ago in sparring, Dave Allen. A brilliant fight, a great response from fans about it. Just how delighted were you to get this opportunity over the line for Johnny?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely brilliant. We've been talking to Matchroom for a while about potentially getting Johnny out in Saudi. I think that we also thought about getting Johnny out in Australia. I wanted to do something different, but really every heavyweight wants to box in Saudi. Johnny wants to box in Saudi. We want to get the biggest fights possible for Johnny and bring him to the widest audience possible. I think Turkey El Sheikh is a big fan of the heavyweights, likes knockouts. And yeah, we've all worked really hard, particularly Matchroom on this. Shout out to Matchroom working really hard to get Johnny that coveted slot on an incredible card. Like, couldn't be more excited for that fight.
And just looking at, obviously, I know you won't want to overlook Dave Allen, a very, very tough test, but a win over Dave Allen will be some statement from Johnny Fisher at this stage of his career with how little experience he had as an amateur coming through. Where would that set him up in 2025? Would you look still to go for an English title or maybe look even higher up, look maybe British, European level?
Look, things change quickly, right? Things change quickly. Who would have thought Fabio Wardley would be talked about fighting for a world title in a few months' time, which is what they're talking about with Dubois? Things change very quickly, and it happened because of the nature of Fabio's win against Fraser. I think how quickly it happened. Had Fabio won a grueling 12-round fight, would we be talking about that? No, it's about when people step up the levels, and this is what Johnny's done. Each time he stepped up the level, he's done really well. He stepped up against to Babic, finished Babic in what, 20, 30 seconds. And I'm saying, I believe Johnny, like Fabio, will go up the levels and produce great performances each time. So who knows how quickly we'll go with Johnny? We could go very quickly with him. I think there are brilliant, brilliant domestic matchups for Johnny Fisher, right from, you know, Moses Atuma to Fabio Wardley, Fraser Clark, all those guys that I would say, with the greatest respect to Fabio, I don't think he's at the world level yet, the Dubois, Fury, Joyce level. I don't think he's at that level, competes at the top level. But yeah, Johnny can mix it with all those guys.
Just quickly, obviously, you mentioned Joe Joyce. I remember seeing a couple clips from an interview that saying that he was going to be out in December. I'm presuming that would have been on the
Yeah.
Magnificent Seven card. What went wrong there in terms of not being able to get Joe on that card?
Without going into too much detail, Joe was ready on that card. There was effectively a how can I best put it? Like a contractual issue with the opponent, like a broadcast contractual issue with the opponent that's just delayed it. So Joe will be out very early next year fighting the opponent we had lined up for December 7th.
That sounds very good. And then just talking about another man that you got on that card, a fight that's been again rescheduled many times, but we have another date for it. Solomon Dakers, David Adelaide. I remember last time we spoke, I asked you, are you going to look away from that fight now? But we've got another date. Hopeful this one goes ahead. Is there a lot more confidence this time?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think I think this fight, I mean, is it the third or fourth time, whatever? I think it is going to go ahead this time. I think it's a terrific fight. I think Solomon Dakers is being overlooked by the whole of the British heavyweight division. I think he gives everyone, again, I think Solomon v Fabio Wardley is a great fight for the British. Who knows? I think probably with Fabio's career trajectory, he's probably going to vacate that. So Solomon should, after this fight, Solomon will be fighting for the British title next. After this fight, after he beats David Adelaide,
Uh, uh,
God is willing, after he beats David Adelaide, he should be fighting next for the British title.
I was going to say that kind of answers my next question in saying I feel like this fight with David Adelaide is kind of bridging his way to fully cement himself as a pure British title contender. Because while he does hold that English, there's some other names in the heavyweight division floating around him that people might think might pip him to the post and get the shot before him. But a win over David Adelaide, and you feel that does secure him a British title shot, whether that is Fabio Wardley or for the vacant title.
Well, it's the third time I've ever defended it.
Yeah, true.
Defended the English title, won it and defended it three times. He's got to be ordered next to fight for the British title against whoever.
Fair enough. And then just moving away, one of the big news that we had, I think only Sunday night, Queensberry will be joining the DAZN after years and years of not seeing Eddie and Frank work together, and Frank sending a lot of shots at Eddie for working with the DAZN. Obviously, I think I saw a great tweet from Sam Jones saying what we think yesterday is not what we'll think today. And it's clear to see that obviously they'll be joining together, and it creates a real interesting scene for British boxing. What do you make of seeing Matchroom and Queensberry under the same broadcaster?
And not just Matchroom and Queensberry either. I think they've got Misfits, they've got Wasserman, they've got GBM, you
Top
know,
tip as well.
top tier. I think you're right. I was talking to someone about this yesterday. We're at a period where right now you'll have some people say, well, to attract casual fans to the sport, you need to be on Sky Sports or TNT Sports. Like one of the reasons I think Joe Joyce is really big is because he did an advert on TNT Sports, and you got a lot of those fans that watch football. When they're watching football, Champions League, Premier League, they come and watch the fights. I think that's traditional boxing kind of logic that you take maybe transfer fans who are watching the football over to the boxing. Box Nation as a channel is effectively what's happening with, to some extent, with DAZN. It's like a specific home for boxing, and I think right now, DAZN had to. It's a very clever move from DAZN. If you want to be the home of boxing, you have to have Queensberry. You have to. They are right now arguably the biggest promoter in the UK. Them and Matchroom a bit, but they're probably arguably the biggest. So DAZN had to have them to establish your home of boxing. What you've then got to see after that is see whether DAZN have other sports on their app. But if DAZN then got, say, Premier League football or something like that, then everyone watching on the app Premier League football will come over to boxing. I think we're in a time when we're seeing things kind of towards the middle of DAZN's trajectory. I think when you look at something like Netflix, for example, for many, many years, people were like, what is this? I'd rather go down Blockbuster. Who wants to go on this app? It's just an app. I think eventually DAZN will become the Netflix of sport. And I think it gives, look, it's what's incredible for the boxing promoters, having been someone who's been working in boxing for many years. And when you get involved with fights, you sell the distribution rights in 200 territories or whatever. And you've got to find a Brazilian broadcaster, a Portuguese broadcaster, a Spanish broadcaster, etc. With DAZN, you've got a global platform instantly, worldwide, everyone can get it. And it is the future of the sport. Right now, some people might think, oh, will their fighters get less coverage? Will they be as well promoted as they are? Will the public know them? I think that's a legitimate thing to talk about. Will people outside of the walled garden of boxing fans know people? Will you be able to grow another superstar? on DAZN? I think the answer is yes in time.
Well, I like the way you mentioned, obviously, having it on TNT and Sky is that they can transition over from, you can have your traditional sports fans who are coming from their football, cricket, whatever sport they were watching.
Hmm.
Obviously, we know that DAZN I think they have Premier League rights, but not in the UK. So do you feel we can still see growth of boxing abroad in the other countries that do have the Premier League rights on DAZN, but British boxing, we will probably go into a little bit of a transitional period here.
I think so. I think you're right. I mean, it is all about established ways of getting people to the sport. Boxing fans will watch boxing however they can. They've got to start till 4 in the morning. They've got to buy something. They'll watch it. It's about how do you create the next Anthony Joshua? How do you create the next Tyson Fury? How do you get those big names of yesteryear, the Chris Eubanks, the Nigel Benns, even people like Carl Froch, those kind of people who would break through. You're going down to the pub, you're going to talk to people about the boxing and what are the names that people know. Right now, we have decent recognition in the sport of a number of big names, but I think within boxing, sometimes we perhaps overestimate what people know outside of boxing and how famous those people are in reality, like world champions, how famous they are. And I think as a manager, you've got to keep a really keen eye on that. I think when I look at who we look after, he's like Johnny Fisher. He's an incredible success story. He's been very well promoted by his promoter, but he's also between him and his dad gone big on socials and cut through to loads and loads of different people on socials, which is really credit to Johnny himself to do that. He's managed to do that, but the world's changing. That's how you get people. You get people on a screen now. So the traditional methods of well, they don't have Premier League, so DAZN won't have any people watching boxing. Yeah, I get that argument, but I think managers, promoters have got to get smarter, and I really do think we're in a transition period.
And then obviously another thing that I mentioned is for smaller promoters. So we obviously seconds out we do our live show on Mondays, and last night when we were doing it, we had people mentioning saying this is quite a bad move for some promoters, for example, like your GBMs and your top tiers. But when you think about it, obviously not as well. DAZN do have the exclusive rights for Riyadh season, and you still see plenty of shows getting promoted. So even for these smaller promoters who, while they might not be the face of the promotion, their shows are still going to be getting spoke about on Riyadh season cards, on the biggest cards across the world. So seeing all these British promoters come together doesn't just have great benefits for that individual promotion, but for all the promoters surrounding them and overall creating more of a
Yeah,
buzz for British boxing.
I totally agree. I don't think this is bad news at all for GBM or top tier. I think this is great news for them because you're getting more people on the app. If you're on the app and you're paying your monthly subscription and you're a boxing fan, you're going to want to watch as much boxing as you can. So the more subscribers driven to the app, the better it is for those other shows. So yeah, it's better for them that Queensberry are involved.
And just looking at some big fights coming up, obviously we know we've spoke about Johnny Fisher versus Dave Allen, so it's only right we talk about the main event very briefly. Usyk versus Fury 2. Obviously we've seen the 12 rounds that they shared back in May. After seeing that, who do you feel is going to come out on top on December 21st?
Like it's a razor sharp fight. It's a razor thin fight, isn't it?
Mm.
Anyone saying otherwise, I think, isn't correct. At the press conference, you look at Usyk's demeanor. He dressed up as the hitman, whatever. He's a very calm guy, very difficult to bet against. Incredible mentality. Very, very difficult. But I think it's gonna be a razor thin decision again. It's a brilliant clash of the two best heavyweights in the division, in my opinion. And you don't want verdicts like this. It could go either way. I'd love it if Tyson would win it for British boxing. Tyson, I know his manager Spencer very well, who's done brilliant work out in Saudi. And I'd love it for them. I'd love it for them to win. But who do I think is actually going to win? I think it's going to be razor sharp decision. And when you look at Usyk and you see his mentality is very difficult to bet against.
One thing that people have been talking about a lot is obviously since we've seen Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois unfold is where does it leave Anthony Joshua? Obviously, we saw the talk saying there was going to be the rematch in February. They seem to have died now. I spoke to Adam Smith on Sunday in Sheffield, and he said if he was guiding Anthony Joshua's career, he'd say sit back, see how Fury versus Usyk 2 plays out, and then make a decision there. if it is obviously the big talk being Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury next, do you feel that fight still holds the same value that it did, let's say, 2, 3 years ago?
Yeah, I think look, AJ is so big he can do what he likes, right? The normal rules don't apply to him. AJ can go and fight anyone, and it's what people are going to watch it. And again, I think this is a case sometimes of does it hold as much store with boxing fans as it did 3 years ago? No, because it's basically two people who have got beat fighting each other. Two people who have got beat, especially if Fury gets beat twice by Usyk each fighting each other. So it doesn't. It's not undefeated v undefeated. It's not going to be for the undisputed titles. It simply doesn't for boxing fans hold the same. However, they are the two biggest, I'd say the two biggest names in the sport. So if they fight each other, do the public care? No, the public don't care. The man on the street doesn't care because he has name recognition of AJ and name recognition of Fury. And because of the juxtaposition of the styles, physically, how they look, how they act, who they are, is a brilliant fight for the masses. So that fight will be enormous, even if they both lost their next 5 fights each.
One thing that obviously you mentioned there is obviously for boxing fans, it doesn't hold that value. Obviously, not undisputed, not undefeated.
Not the same, not the
Yeah,
same.
yeah, not the same. Obviously, it still holds a lot of value, and I'm sure it still do great numbers. But obviously, whenever we hear obviously mentions of records and stuff like that, the big thing for me and some other people is you look at an MMA where you've got fighters, for example, someone like Conor McGregor who hasn't fought in 3 or 4 years now, lost his last two fights, but he still holds that spot as the biggest name, and all people want to do is just see him back. Do you feel boxing fans need to adapt that MMA mindset where even when you lose, you're not finished, and you can still come back? So you see MMA fighters competing for titles with records of like 24 wins and 13 losses. And
Yeah,
if we had that in boxing, that's what you call our gatekeeper, just there to give you rounds. Do you
yeah.
feel we need to see boxing fans adapt a bit more of that mindset and maybe not care so much about the undefeated records?
Some boxing fans are purists, right? So I don't think you're going to change the minds of boxing fans. They know what they like, they respect what they like, and ultimately, you know, the best people will have the best records. I think I'm not an MMA fan, so you'd have to speak to someone in that sport. But I would imagine the purest MMA fans probably don't like it that Conor McGregor's still the biggest draw in the sport, right? Because they think he's a guy that's lost. I don't know what the figures are, 3 of his last 5 or 4 of his last 6. But the point is, what Conor McGregor does, what AJ does, what Fury does, is draw in. I hate to use the word, but casuals to the sport that wouldn't otherwise be drawn in because they have huge social followings and they're very interesting people who people look up to. So, if you go on the street now and ask 100 people to name an MMA fighter, it'll be Conor McGregor #1 by miles.
And then just moving away from this and looking at Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois, obviously, like I said, we thought we were going to see the rematch in February, but that doesn't seem to be the case now. Out of looking at those names that the IBF have approved for Daniel Dubois' next opponent, which one do you look at and think, yeah, that's the fight that I want?
Daniel Dubois, Guido Vianello.
Was
That's
he
the one.
was he on the approved list?
He's in the top 15.
So it could be made.
He's in the top 15, but they've ordered a number one a fight for the #1 spot.
Oh,
It's Caballero against Martin Bakole.
yeah.
And I don't know if Caballero or Bakole is going to take that, but I hope Guido Vianello gets to fight for that. I think I'm not just saying this because we look after Guido, but they have sparred each other. They are incredibly evenly matched. It would be an incredible fight between those two. A lot of people watching this don't know who Guido is, but that would be an incredible fight.
Do you feel Guido's not going to get the recognition he deserves and will probably go into the fight as a massive underdog if he is to get that?
Yeah, massive underdog. He'll go into it as a huge underdog. But Daniel knows who he is. They've shared the ring quite a few times. And I would absolutely love to see that fight.
Another fight that's been mentioned a lot for Daniel Dubois is a fight with Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker's obviously we've seen him on TalkSport on Saturday night saying that he's frustrated and saying that he just wants to get in the gym. He's saying he's been building up his power, adding on a bit of muscle. If it is Joseph Parker versus Daniel Dubois, who do you feel comes out on top there?
It's a great fight. I bumped into Joe Parker at Junaid's fight, actually. He looks big in a good way.
Hmm.
bumped into him as S&C coach. It's in fine form. The guy's come off of beating Zhang and Wilder. Like he's obviously on great form. I think it's a brilliant fight. Um, yeah, difficult to know how that one goes, how the new Parker goes. But yeah, I highly rate Joseph Parker. Actually, I think it's very hard to know when you look at that Dubois AJ fight. Dubois got huge credit for it, rightfully so. Um, it's hard to know what stage AJ's at in his career to really grade that fight. So Dubois Parker, tough on that. I like Parker in that fight actually.
Do you still feel, obviously, in one way, it's very hard to tell where AJ is in his career because there just wasn't, we didn't see a lot from him. But do you feel at the same time, we still might not know an awful lot about Daniel Dubois in terms of the defense because I know a lot of people say the best form of defense is attack, and I think he proved that by just not letting AJ get any shots off at all. But do you feel in a fight with Joseph Parker and someone who's not going to approach it the same way as AJ, we might see Daniel Dubois really, really tested now?
Look, if you look at people's resumes and who they've lost to, I mean, both of them got beat by Joe in different ways. Joe ground Parker down, um, and with Dubois, he was just very, very disciplined. But that's the very top level. But Parker's beaten Wilder and Zhang. Okay, you can criticize both of those guys in different ways, but I think I think from a boxing perspective, he's going to give Daniel quite a challenge.
And then just lastly, we've seen Chris Eubank Jr. making headlines still this in the last couple of weeks. This time we got told Ben Shalom said that they were in talks to face Canelo, and within I think 2 or 3 days, Canelo's manager and trainer Eddie Reynoso came out and said, "We're not entertaining that fight. We tried to give them the opportunity back earlier in the year. He's not getting that fight now." Ben Shalom has said that he wants to make big fights for Eubank Jr., but there doesn't seem to be a lot of big fights out there. What did you make of the whole situation that Chris Eubank Jr. finds himself in?
Yeah, look, I think he's when we were going back to the top of this conversation about well-known boxers, Chris Eubank Jr.'s got a really good name recognition. You know, people are interested in what he does. He's also cultivated his personality really well on social media. People are like Chris Eubank Jr. v someone is interesting, right? So credit to him for getting there. I think there are interesting fights for him. I think Canelo. Well, people always mention Canelo's name, don't they? I really like the Hamza Shiraz fight. Actually, I think Eubank Shiraz is a great fight. I don't know what's happened to the Conor Benn fight, but yeah, I'd like to see Eubank Shiraz.
Just on Hamza Shiraz, Frank Warren did come out in an interview and say that in February Hamza Shiraz will be fighting for a world title. Now, I saw a few comments on Twitter, and obviously some people might be taking like having a little joke about it here, but people did say obviously Eubank Jr. does hold an IBO, which is recognised as a world title. Do you feel there's any possibility that we do see that fight?
No, I don't think in February you see it. I think he's gonna. I think he's gonna fight for one of the more recognised four belts, the BC or the BA or something like that.
Well, we know that he is obviously the mandatory for Janabek. If we do get to see Shiraz versus Janabek, who do you favour?
What a fight! What a fight! Yanabek almost looks unbeatable, but I don't. I think Hamza Shiraz is one of the most underrated boxers in Britain, and he should be an absolute superstar. So, um, yeah, I'm Team Shiraz in that fight.
And then just quickly, very, very lastly on Eubank Ben here. Obviously we've seen the rivalry, I guess you could say, reignited in Riyadh. It went quiet for a few years. They had the little confrontation in the hotel on the weigh-in day. Then again on fight night, the rivalry seems to be really sparked up again. A lot of factors that are going to possibly hold the fight back. Obviously, we're not sure on Conor Benn's current status.
Yep.
He's cleared by the board, the weight as well. But if that fight is to get made, a lot of talk about whether that could sell out a stadium or not. Do you feel that fight could easily sell out, let's say, a Tottenham?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think again, it's two people who people know, and you can't underestimate the power of that.
Mm.
For the casual fan to say, "Oh yeah, Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank's sons are fighting," and themselves, Connor and Chris are well known. So yeah, will it fill out a Tottenham? I don't know. Actually, I'm not sure, but they're famous, stroke infamous. That's a big fight for Britain. That's a really, really big fight for Britain.
Obviously, in the public side, this fight's going to be seen as Chris Eubank Sr. and Chris Eubank Sr. and Nigel Benn's sons fighting. But do you feel, for boxing fans, the perspective of this fight could be changing in that? when the fight was first made, it was made on the family history and the fights that Nigel and Chris Eubank Sr. had previously. But as time's gone on, because of what's happened in the circumstances we found ourselves in, this fight seems to have got a lot more personal between Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn now. Do you see it that way as well?
Yeah, I think it was building up that way when they were going to fight. Was it 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was meant to be October 2022.
Yeah, when they were going to fight 2 years ago, they were doing it. I remember, wasn't Chris Eubank Jr. like eating McDonald's or something deliberately, or weren't they all messing about their weights? Yeah, look, they're two great characters, two great talkers, and they can make it about. I think you've got them as individuals making it about themselves and their dads make it a huge fight, and that's why the promoters want it to happen.
Who do you think would come out on top out of Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn?
Eubank Jr. is too big.
Simple. All right, Adam, appreciate your time today.
Cheers,
Hope
Josh.
to catch up again soon. Cheers.
Hey, mate.